What would you advise in that scenario?
Well, let me take a step back based on that question, right? Um, I tell her to everybody, any connection to the internet, right? Your internet service provider only protects their stuff, right? So if you get business internet from Verizon or whoever, right, from your modem router, whatever that connection is to you, like that's where you own responsibility. You have to do something about that security portion. So any type of business that involves data, whether it's personal PII, processing of payments. If you're using an information system, you need to have some type of security. So that I say that to the beginning part of your question. Now, to answer your question, um, contact somebody in your local area, contact us, Albert Well, whoever, to really dive into and understand that. Right? There's tons of tools where we can, excuse me, on scan remotely or on site to look for vulnerabilities.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Medallion XLN Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Alan Elliott, CEO of Elliott Management LLC. If you enjoy this conversation, please like and subscribe. It really helps us to reach more people and to broaden our audience. So let's get started with the podcast. So, Alan, thank you for joining our podcast. How are you doing today?
And thank you for having me. I am doing fantastic, man. Just enjoying this unpredictable Texas weather.
You're in Texas. Which part?
So we're right outside of Dallas. We're located in Cedar Hill, Texas, which is it's Dallas County, but it's probably about 25 minutes south of Dallas.
Oh, very interesting. How's the weather around this time of year?
It's starting to get cold. The leaves are just falling off the trees. So at my home, I have a pile of leaves that need to be raked, but uh, it's like a wind vortex at my home. So all the leaves from the neighborhood like piles over here. So I'm still waiting on everybody else's to fall off before I tackle that project.
Does your area have tornadoes? Is there a lot of tornadoes over there?
I mean, we get tornadoes in Texas. Knock on some wood. No tornadoes have come through my neighborhood or my community, but we do get tornadoes out here. We were actually under a tornado watch earlier this morning. So funny you bring it up.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's get started. So, Alan, you are in the cybersecurity space and you do work for businesses, local governments, states, and federal. And what are some key takeaways from your space?
Let's see, man. It's honestly a lot of takeaways, but uh, the one takeaway that I push and my team push is fundamentals. Uh, you can't be, a world class athlete. You can't be world class in anything unless you take care of the fundamentals. So those fundamentals that I'm talking about or speak of, excuse me, my light just went out, are, the basic things, cyber hygiene, just understanding what your configuration is, your asset management, software, hardware baselines, really drilling down to the basic steps before you start adding, you know, tons and tons of software and products, right? So with our customers, that's what we do. We come in, we listen to their needs, we listen to their challenges, and then we address their fundamental issues, right? Because it's like anything else. If you go to the doctor and you say I have a headache, right, or this pain is ailing me, rather than treating the symptom, let's find out what the root cause is and treat that so we can really have a flourishing healthy body or a flourishing cybersecurity program.
Wow. Now, you mentioned a term I've not heard before, cyber hygiene. Can you
Hmm.
explain
Yeah, so it's equated to personal hygiene, right? When you wake up, you wash your face, brush your teeth, you might, jump in the shower, you hit the hot spots, as my grandmother used to say, right? And when you walk out or you step out, I mean, you're looking good, you're smelling good, right? There's no odor. So
that?
in the relation to cyber hygiene is, you have your plans, your policies, your practices in place. So it's constant, right? It's constantly monitoring, it's constantly reevaluating itself to make sure that it's in the best possible state. Whether it's secure, whether it's unsecure, whatever, like you can verify and validate that it's there, and continuously progress that issue or issues that may come up or may arise. So that's what, for our perspective, we look at cyber hygiene. You're doing audits, you maintaining your configuration, you got a good change management plan and policy in place that you follow, and it's mature, things of that nature.
So, what you're saying is pretty much if you uh, follow a set of routines and you consistently stay up to date on, I guess, your configuration, then then you're less likely to be a victim of a cyber attack. Is that a correct assessment of what you're saying?
Correct. So you're continuously monitoring those things, right? So you'll put a control in place, right? From a cybersecurity perspective, a control is a measure that mitigates your risk from exposure. So if a control might be audits, you do audits, every week, right? Now, are you splitting hairs? Are it every 7 days? Is it, one day, Monday through Sunday, and you switch it up? But whatever that is, you're doing that and you're looking for those things that might change or deviate or be unusual to your environment, right?
That does make sense, but I'm not sure how like I'm not sure if anyone would actually do that on a consistent basis because in relation to hygiene, like
Mhm.
you wake up, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, and then you go about your day and do whatever else you need to do, right?
Mhm.
But no, as far as like cybersecurity and going through all these processes and routines, like as a business person or even a local government, you have so much other things to do. How can you like really stay on top of these things?
Man. So again, going back to the basics, right? You got to have a process or practice in place. So let's just take it from a perspective of a business or a local government, right? Uh, they might not have the environment or the resources to uh, provide or maintain or sustain that, right? But if you have a practice in place and it's repeatable and you understand what you're looking for and what's normal to your environment, then it helps you detect what's different. So, for example, uh, I don't know what type of machine you're using, but if you're using a Mac, like I do, uh, every week, I have a habit of just restarting the machine, right? Because there's patches and things and updates that may be pushed, but if you don't restart that machine, then it may not get patched and updated, right? So that's just a simple practice. But if you're talking about a little bit of a larger environment, multiple workstations, you don't necessarily have the IT or cybersecurity staff to monitor that. Then obviously you bring in a third party who can actually do that piece for you. But it's those habits that you have to develop in order to maintain that security, because your security is your responsibility, right? Even if you transfer the risk to a third party, uh, you still need to be aware. You still need to know if they're doing what they say they're doing. And
Right.
that's a whole other topic right there where you have MSPs, saying this laundry list of things they're going to do. And then when you start digging into it, they're not performing.
Okay. Now that's personal responsibility. So where does your company come in?
So we come in and we help organizations with just exactly what I said, right? So our MSSP program, our Managed Security Service Provider program, we take local businesses, small businesses, local governments, and we say, hey, let us focus and monitor the cybersecurity portion for you, right? You have an IT department that focuses on making sure the IT works. You have us to make sure that the solutions they're putting in place are actually secure, right? That's the balance, right, between IT and cyber. If it was up to me, IT will report into cyber because now you have that oversight to make sure that whatever solution is being brought into your environment or your boundary is actually secure and legitimate, right? You don't want to add something that's going to add more risk, right? You want to reduce or mitigate that risk. So that's where we come in. We establish controls. We monitor those controls continuously if you want us to, or we can just give you a plan and tell you to go implement it. So we can do as much or as little as you'd like us.
And what has been your results with your clients, with your client
So,
base?
so our client base, I mean, they've all been extremely happy, right? Because it's an education process. Our team, to include myself, we all come out of the federal space, federal government space. My personal background, I was a program security officer for the Air Force for a number of years. In that capacity, we had to be really aware of the cybersecurity, right? We had to speak the language, not only speak it, but we had to know it and be able to interpret it, and if so, validate and apply it. So myself, teammates on my team, they're from DCSA, Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and they're all cyber professionals. So we bring a lot of those practices that are implemented through documents such as the joint, the JSIG or the DCSA DAPM, and we bring those practices to industry, small and local businesses, to include government, to say, hey, these are some practices you can implement to really mitigate your risk.
Okay. Now, what are some, like, if you're at privilege? I know I don't want you to tell anything that's top secret. But
No, I wouldn't do that.
what are some of the guidelines that the Air Force that you learned from the Air Force that you bring to small businesses?
For example, continuous monitoring. Let's just start there. The days of, setting a computer where it is and, it's not going to touch nothing and it's never going to change, like that went out the window a long time ago, right? Every single day risk evolve. So it's important to continuously monitor the controls that you put in place based on the risks that are known and unknown that are out there. So you test them, you put it in place, you test it, you develop what we call like a system assessment plan. And based on each control, you have a plan to test it, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, to evaluate that control is still effective.
Okay. So just to sum up what you just said, system control, you put like a set of, I guess, checklists that you go, which pretty much relates to the cyber hygiene that we're speaking about earlier, right? All right, sounds great. Now, what are some of the customers that you work with right now? What are some of the challenges that they're facing?
Oh man. So without kind of putting anybody on blast, but their challenges range, right? It ranges from, hey, I don't know what to do over here. We know we got to do something. Can you help me? To, we have this, staff of 12, 13 people doing this, but we're still short change, we're short task. Can you help us, identify efficiencies? Can you help us, do an assessment or a risk assessment to tell us where our issues are? Can you help us develop a plan of action, a milestone to fix this challenge, because we don't necessarily have the money to fix that right now. Excuse me, and things of that nature. So it's wide ranging, and one thing about cyber security is that no one issue is alike. Um, you might have an auditing issue, and I might have an auditing issue, but they're still different, right? So they all have to be handled independently and delicately themselves. So we've we've done things from developing authority to operate packages because it's a company that's new to to the defense industrial base, all the way to assessments on state entities.
Okay. All right. So when I spoke to, so we have a mutual connection, Albert Whale. He was on, I think, episode 8 of our podcast, and he spoke to us about cybersecurity and certain things that we can do to mitigate the risk that we all face on a day-to-day basis, because the internet, although there are a lot of safeguards in place, it's still a very dangerous place to be on. And, your system can be compromised already and you don't even know it. And that's known as a 0-day attack. Right? So what are some solutions that you have done in order to figure out if a system has been compromised already? Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. So 0 days are they're tricky because somebody has to find it. Once they release it, there's going to be people throughout the world who are going to look for that issue and that hole. But again, it's about risk mitigation. If you're using, if you're going to introduce anything with a particular operating system into your network, you still got to have controls in place around that, right? So, auditing, scans, your firewall settings, all that stuff is very important to somewhat mitigate the risk. Now, if it's a couple weeks, I think it was a few months ago, Microsoft had a huge 0-day vulnerability. I forgot, the name escapes me right now, but it's Microsoft. Everybody uses that, right? So that's a tough one to mitigate. But once it's out there, now you know what to look for. And then, you have people like us or people internal to your organization poke around and see if that vulnerability has been exploited.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I'm a brand new customer. Let's say I started my business a few months ago. Don't really know too much about cybersecurity. Let's say I have maybe do you work with local businesses before I continue this question?
Absolutely. Work with local businesses. I have a business mentor who does credit card processing, right? Shout out to Phil Benamino. But, some of his customer base, they use hardware, iPads, tablets, whatever you want to call it, for their transactions and their day-to-day things. However, the processing, right, has to be compliant with processing payment card industry standards, right? But no one's monitoring that system. So, we help organizations monitor that system to ensure that, yes, while the processing of the payment is secure, but is your system secure? Is your system healthy? Is it patched? Is it being maintained? So we help local businesses with that, various, restaurants all the way up to, manufacturers.
Oh, very cool. So continuing the question, local business just got started, experiencing record success. And obviously that's a target to any malicious actor because I'm pretty much a hotspot. But suddenly I see that my things are acting up. It's not going the way that it's usually going. And I think something is up. I think I'm compromised in some way. But as someone who's new to this industry and doesn't have too much knowledge of cybersecurity, not sure what my next step should be. What would you advise in that scenario?
Well, let me take a step back based on that question, right? I tell it to everybody. any connection to the internet, right? Your internet service provider only protects their stuff, right? So if you get business internet from Verizon or whoever, right, from your modem router, whatever that connection is to you, like that's where you own responsibility. You have to do something about that security portion. So any type of business that involves data, whether it's PII, processing the payments. If you're using an information system, you need to have some type of security. So that I say that to the beginning part of your question. Now, to answer your question, contact somebody in your local area, contact us, Albert Well, whoever, to really dive into and understand that. Right? There's tons of tools where we can, on scan remotely or on site to look for vulnerabilities and potential exploits. So if it's not functioning properly, we can walk through that process, right? We don't go for the high end solution, right? Let's start with the basics. Okay, have you patched? Have you done this? Have you done that? Walk you through that process to validate that it's not anything that it's just something simple to fix before we get to the, oh my goodness, you've been hacked, right? So we walk organizations from literally from cradle to grave, step by step, and we'll find and pinpoint whatever that issue is, and then we'll develop a plan to resolve that. So whether it's a quick fix or you might want to notify local authorities, and here's what that process looks like, right? We can actually employ all of those.
Okay. So do you have any tools that you can provide to me as a new business that can help me with my cyber hygiene? Like something that can do like continuous integration or continuously, check on my systems to make sure that it's not compromised in any way?
So now here's the shameless plug, right? Yes, our MSSP program can help you with that. So we can continuously monitor and scan your networks for vulnerabilities. We have a virtual SOC, and we also have a partnership with another individual, another company that can monitor in real time. So if you want to go that route, you can. But small businesses, we primarily, if you're around the 3 to 5 million range, we focus on that aspect, right? Because now you're even more of a target, and it might behoove you, depending on what your business strategy and goals are, to actually go that route of monitoring versus something a little less. But as far as products, we partner with Tenable, we partner with TrustMap. We just not just, but we've been partnering with Albert Well and It's Safe. So we got some tools and some products out there that can help you monitor in real time and near real time your risk.
Okay. Now let's update that scenario to local municipality or local governments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, who would be in charge of like the local government? Would it be like the mayor, or does the mayor have a cybersecurity expert? Or how would that
Well,
work?
so DHS is kicking out a ton of money right now to local municipalities as well as counties to bring themselves up into modern day cybersecurity standards. So to answer your question, within the local municipality, you have your IT directors, right? IT directors report into your city management. So your city managers are actually the ones who are ultimately responsible, right, for the management of the day-to-day aspect of the city. Then the IT director is responsible for the IT, and in a lot of, I would say, your second tier municipalities, right? I'm not talking about your, New York, Houston, or New York, LA, Chicago, right? I'm talking about more of your smaller larger cities to second tier cities where you may not have a team focused on cybersecurity. However, they'll ask IT people to be dual hatted, right? And not saying that all IT people can't do cyber, but there's just a fundamental difference in how IT people go about IT and cyber people go about securing IT.
Okay. So as the city manager, I'm pretty much in charge of like the cyber infrastructure of the city, amongst other things. I'm sure he has like a lot on his plate, right? On his
Mhm.
plate. So this punk kid, let's say, is in school. He wants to hack into the county system so he can get his grades changed, and suddenly as a city manager, like I'm experiencing, like the system's not working the way it should. What are things that I should do as a city manager in order to, address the situation?
Um, let's. I would say the city manager is going to be aware of it, right? And they're going to be the one that's ultimately going to, where the buck lies. But the uh, I would start with your IT director in that and a team that supports the IT director. They have to be aware and they have to be unafraid to say ring their alarm and say, hey, we got some cyber issues, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, those things go unreported, or they just they figure out, well, maybe if we don't tell nobody, it'll be okay. But if somebody's in your network, right, you're putting all of your city and your city employees at risk, right? If their data
Mm-hmm.
being taken, critical infrastructure within the city, whether it's water, lights, things of that nature, plumbing, it can really be a disaster. So I would first say is being willing to say, hey, we have a problem, we got to fix this, right? Raise the issue. If you don't know, raise it to your IT director. IT director don't know, raise it to your assistant city manager. Assistant city manager don't know, raise it to the city manager. Like raise it to the level where you can get the appropriate support. Um, and even if you don't have one, you should always focus on developing and maintaining a incident response plan. That is key because those are going to be the actions that you take to mitigate that risk initially. Okay, have a good strategy and a plan, and actually test the plan for your disaster recovery. Right, so you get your backups. Don't back them up once every 6 months, and you're 6 months behind. But identify a plan to continuously to have backup data, whether it's in the cloud, somewhere outside of your organization where you can spin it up pretty quickly should uh, you have a ransom attack or anything of that nature.
Okay. Yeah. So that was my next question. At which point or what steps should I take in the interim between like noticing these issues and having my entire city being held ransom for like 3 million Bitcoin, just like what happened in Baltimore a few years ago?
Yeah.
What are the steps between those two
Um,
points?
and like I said, the steps can vary, right? But I'll say first step is you don't pay the ransom, right? Because if you pay the ransom, it's just like they're gonna come back later and try to get you for more money because they know that you're gonna pay it. So, the first step of anything is acknowledging it. Okay, we got this problem, we got this issue. Um, Now, if you had good cyber hygiene in place, right, and you got an incident response plan, you take the first steps to isolate. And if the systems are shut down and you can't necessarily isolate, then what do you do next, right? So, and locally we had, excuse me, in our local school district, where a couple months ago was held at ransom. Then they had to restart everything. Code wipe, and then pull from their backups and reinstall and do everything from scratch all over. Now, there's things that they could have done as far as having a continuous monitoring plan where you're constantly validating those backups and you're constantly doing incremental data backups, um, you know, to a third party cloud service provider or somewhere else to ease some of that. But if you're hit with ransom and they got control of your stuff, it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be very unpleasant for a while. But the steps to recovery can actually be sped up if you have proper cyber hygiene in place and actionable steps to take.
Hmm. Very cool. So it all comes back to cyber hygiene. That's like
Hey man,
my key to in
listen,
this entire
you,
conversation.
you got you got to
Unless you're
wake. Absolutely. You got to get up every morning, wash your face, brush your teeth before you step outside, right? You don't want to go outside funky, so you got to make sure your hygiene is right. You got to be on point. One of my mother's sayings when I was a kid is, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. She's always telling me that, and the same applies for cyber. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So
very cool. So Alan, how did you get into this industry?
man, honestly, I ran from it. I went to the military after high school. I realized college wasn't for me because they wanted me to go to class. So I was like, nah, I'm gonna go do something different. So I joined the military, and I scored high enough on, at the time it was called the ASVAB. I don't know what it's called now, but I scored high enough to qualify for every job within the Navy, with the exception of like two. And everything that they were placing is like this table they have, and they have all these different jobs at the time, and it's like paper documents. You read it, toss it, so on and so forth. Uh, and the majority of the jobs they were IT specific, they were computer specific. Um, but at the time, being a young kid, I was like, I don't want to go on a ship. You don't want to go on a ship, but you decide to join the Navy. I don't know how that works, but so exactly.
Wait.
So I choose the cryptologic technician administrative. It's a really long and cool word for saying special security officer, SSO type work. So that's how I got into the space of special programs. Within that, at the time I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. They had this thing called DICAP, which was your old accreditation process for information systems. So I got to learn a little bit about it, and I got thrown into it to do audits because I was deployed in the Middle East, and our ISO, Information System Security Officer at the time, had left. So they were like, "Oh, good, you're gonna do audits." So that's how I started to get into it. That was around 2005, and I ran from it from another 8 years until DICAP finally, faded away, and they were introducing risk management framework. And at the time, it was a really big thing in the industry because everybody was like, "Oh, what do you mean? It's like this doesn't make any sense. Like these controls, and you want us to evaluate them continuously." So it was just a lot of, I would say, uncertainty, right? Because it was something new, uh, but it made sense to me because it was kind of something I was accustomed to, right? Which is change, and change is good because it forces you to evaluate what you're doing right now at the moment that is not going to help you later on. So you need to change in order to be better later on, or 2 seconds or 5 minutes from now. So it kind of resonated with me, and I took an interest to it, and then I got pulled over to the Air Force to work as a program security officer, and that's when I really kind of started to like it. As crazy as it sounds, so I ran from it from a number of years, and ultimately began to like it, and been running with that ever since.
It's a very, very cool story, especially, just as a young man, college isn't for everyone. And you identified that. But apparently you were like a genius because you qualified for all the jobs except for like the top two, I guess.
And
So,
no, I won't say genius. I'll be honest. Like all throughout school, I was a C student, right? Uh, like if I can do absolutely the bare minimum and get a C, I would do that, right? Um, and when I took the ASVAB, that was the first time. It's gonna sound crazy. That was the first time in anything somewhat academic I actually tried to apply myself. So I actually tried to take the test, put effort into it, and I did pretty well on it. So, but I wouldn't say a genius or anything like that. But uh, just like anybody else, when you finally commit to apply yourself, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff.
yeah. Like they say, A students work for C students and B students work for the government.
100%, 100%. Because the C students, we look at it and be like, I ain't doing all this, man, to get no A. Like the same piece of, excuse me, I won't call it a piece of paper, but the same degree that you'll get, in high school and undergrad that, you'll spend hours to get an A on. I can do a third of that time and still pass with a C. All you need is a 2.0.
So one of the secrets of Silicon Valley is that C students are the best programmers because, like C students are lazy and they don't want to do things over and over again. So they just write scripts, just like automate it, and they don't have to ever do it over and over again. So I think Bill Gates, one of his famous quotes was that he always tries to find the laziest person and put them in charge because they'll figure out the easiest way to get things done.
That is, I used to use that in school. I had I had a teacher. His name was Mr. McCarthy. I'll never forget him because he was an army vet. Um, no, he wasn't an older guy. He was fairly young, but he used to tell me all the time. He said, "Man, if you apply yourself, you can be so great." And I used to be like, "Wow, I'm doing just fine with a C." And then I broke that quote out to him, and he said, "That is not the intention of that quote." But I'm like, "But it's true." So it's so funny that you bring that up because I've been using that since about high school.
I mean, I think there's some truth to it. Like, C students, they just try to find the easiest way to get from point A to point B.
Hey,
And sometimes that's what's needed. You
you
don't need
know,
like a complicated algorithm. You just need something that gets the job done.
100%. And let's dig into that a little bit, right? Um, it's not bad, right? I wouldn't say it's lazy, right? I would say no. Don't get me wrong. There are some lazy people out there, but I wouldn't necessarily say lazy. It's it's cutting through the BS, right? Like a lot of times we make problems harder than they have to be. Um, it's not again. We got to get from point A to point B, and some people like to make a bunch of different changes and directions. But if I can go the straightest point, right, the straightest line to get to there, like that's what it is. You're just identifying how to cut through the nonsense or the stuff that isn't necessarily required or needed to make things better. So um, when I worked in industry, that was one of the things to include OSI PJ. Like that is one of the things that I always looked at and I always asked those questions. I always asked why. Why do we do this? And one thing a pet peeve of mine was when people say, "Well, that's just the way we always did it." So if I mean, even to this day, when my team is like, "You want to see me get angry? You want to see me go from 0 to 100? Tell me that. That's the way we always done it." That's not a good answer, right? Like we have to we have to keep up with the risk. We have to keep up with time. We have to keep up with technology. We have to keep up with the pace of life. right? And if you're doing something monotonous that takes a lot of time, that is consuming, that is just, for the lack of better terms, tradition, uh, that's not good enough, right? So we got to slice through the minutia.
Hmm. That's interesting because as that relates to me, when I first got into programming, like I had no interest in tech whatsoever. Like I thought it was for nerds, but I dropped out of college, and because like it just wasn't, I just wasn't it wasn't doing anything for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I dropped out of college to start my own business. And at that point I was just like, I was humble and I was like, I'll start anything that makes money. So I don't care. If I have to wash cars, if I have to mow lawns, I don't care. So one of the first things I did was I bought a laptop and I, I I got my mom's like lawnmower and went door to door knocking. Hey, you need your grass cut. You need grass cut. You need grass cut. And the first person who said yes, I tried to cut his lawn, and my lawnmower blew up. I was like, no, can't cut grass anymore. And somehow, like my little brother, he was in like ninth grade at the time, and he was learning Photoshop. And I just like sat next to him and watched and like kind of picked it up. And I was like, all right, now I'll just go business to business and ask people if they need business cards. And
Yeah.
that became like my new source of revenue. But the point of the story is because like I was seeing the industry through new eyes and I had no kind of like background on how things were supposed to work,
Mm-hmm.
I ended up doing things a lot more efficiently because, since I only have a laptop and my laptop is pretty much the only resource that I need, I don't need to get like a big old office and pay rent and do all this other stuff. I just like have the laptop, I go business to business, I earn my income, and all that income goes to me except for what I pay to get the cards printed.
Mm-hmm.
So and that kind of pattern persists throughout the course of my business because I started realizing like how much money I was saving by not having to like pay overhead. And
Mm-hmm.
back then, like, having an office was like a huge thing, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't need an office, right? Like I only need a laptop. Like, so it's interesting because I was looking through this industry through new eyes, like I didn't have a choice but to innovate. And that's pretty much all I ever did. I was just innovating and innovating because I didn't know what I was doing was supposed to be wrong. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
I had customers and they would want a website and, just go on YouTube and learn how to like build Flash websites. And I'll give them these amazing Flash websites with music and like all types of cool stuff just popping at you. And people really enjoyed it. And like, I didn't know I was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
like not give them so much for the price that they were paying, but
Yeah.
it was all about like just seeing things through new eyes, right? You're not conformed to like this old traditional way of doing things. So you don't know that what you're doing is wrong, or you don't know that what you're doing is more efficient than what other people are doing. You're just kind of doing things the way you see fit.
No, 100%. And you said a number of things I like to touch on. I'll start with the most recent. You know, it's okay. I look towards the youth, right? I'm an old man. I'm 38, so I have a 21-year-old, and I say, hey, what's going on? Tell me what's new, right? And she introduces me as well as my 10-year-old son to different things and concepts, right? And I have conversations with them without them really understand. My oldest understands, but my youngest not necessarily. And it's like when you don't have those mental parameters about how an industry works or what the industry norm is or organizational norm is, like you slice through the minutia. So that's good. That's what that I think that is what's going to separate the new wave of businesses that's going to come into existence versus the old businesses that have been around, since the industrial age, right? Is they're playing defense we're trying to solve problems, right? So it's a little bit of a different game, definitely a different game we're playing, but our approach is different. So a couple years ago, you saw institutions of higher learning, starting entrepreneurship programs, right? Like I was one school that actually had a degree program in entrepreneur, like to be an entrepreneur. And I thought that was the most craziest thing ever because it's like, why would you go to school to learn to be an entrepreneur? Like that is just like that's insanity to me personally. In organizations, they have entrepreneurship within an organization. It's like that's an oxymoron in my opinion, right? Like how are you going to have entrepreneurship in an organization that you don't own? That's crazy, right? So you're still confined to these norms and these standards, but it's entrepreneurship. Like no, you don't own anything. You can't take necessary risks. Like you still have to ask permission. Like you can't be truly entrepreneurial, right? And if you and I'm not knocking higher education, right? It serves a purpose in some aspects, but to go to a university to learn to be an entrepreneur is like going to school to get and I'm not knocking it, but get to a business administration or a business management degree. Like that's a lot of money that you're going to pay to get that when you can go out here and actually do it and learn in real time. And when you're young, you have one thing that people who are my age or older don't have, which is time. Like you can make those mistakes. You can make those. You can learn from your mistakes early and bounce back much faster because you don't have families, you don't have mortgages, you don't have those overhead things that you talked about, right? You don't have those things, so you can be much more riskier in your strategy and your dreams, right? You can have grander visions and dreams because you don't have those constraints that somebody with a family may or may not have, right? And so I say all that, and then there was another thing that you said earlier. You talked about, your entrepreneurial spirit where you started, going door to door and want to cut grass. I'm from Rochester, New York. So if anybody knows anything about Rochester, New York, the winters are the worst, right? They start around September and they go until April. And you get that lake effect snow that comes across the water from Canada. And you get snowflakes the size of like 18-wheeler tires, right? I mean, just the biggest snowflakes you ever seen in your life. So as kids, we used to do that. It was snow. We would like being outside. So we would go door to door and ask people, hey, can I shovel your driveway? Can I shovel your walk path? Right. And that for me started my desire to be entrepreneurial because I would spend literally 10 hours outside going door to door shoveling snow in the cold, and I like that feeling to I put in the work, right? I did this, I laid the salt down, and I might get 10 to 20 bucks. So always knew that I wanted to do something for myself. I just didn't know what, and then here we are, eons later, and I'm doing that. So very similar paths.
Yeah. So one thing that I like to acknowledge is that, although I'm trying to like order my words, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I took the route that I did and just like dove in, because that's the best way to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But I would say that school and traditional ways of learning, it does give you some kind of structure, and I kind of do wish that I had that structure like when I was figuring everything out, because at least I'll be able to align, like just know that, okay, in order for like having quarterly reports, those are good because it gives you a goal to try to hit. Mm-hmm. And every single quarter, you try to outdo your last quarter, which is good because that allows your business to grow. So there are some things that I wish that I was able to learn from a traditional college or something like that, because that would have better structured me for success and helped me to scale. Because, although I was surprisingly doing pretty well, I was like making a lot of money because like I didn't have any overhead. So all the traditional graphic design firms, I could just like charge half of what they charge and just make 100% profit, right? And especially like when I got websites, that was all me. Like I made the customer pay for the hosting and I just built the website, charged them like $1,500. Now all that $1,500 went directly to me, right?
Wait a second. Let's pause there for a moment. Cause as a small business owner, right? Like I learned this from my business mentor. As far as your pricing structure, right? When you said that, hey, well, I would charge them half of what these other ones were charging, and all that would come to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unknowingly to yourself, you kind of shot yourself in the foot, right? Because you didn't prepare for growth, right? You didn't bid. Yeah. And so I tell people that if like we launched in the middle of COVID, right? So we didn't have the overhead, right? We didn't have the office space that a lot of people were dealing with, so that made our price a little more attractive. But and I did the same thing initially. Well, if I charge them half the price, then we can go on and so forth. My business mentor stopped me. He said, "Hey, you don't have overhead, but you need to plan for that day when you do, right? So it may, your overhead may not be, 10 or 12 or 14% like some organizations, but you still need to have some in there, right? You got to plan for growth, right? And you can't plan for growth if you're only getting the cost of labor. You understand? So now going back to what you talked about as far as the quarterly reports and having that structure from school. Now I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off when I say this, right? And I'm okay with that. So that school does not help you with that, in my opinion, right? Because look at the cost of a university, right? You're in California, right? So what's the closest university to you?
Probably there's a lot. There's Berkeley, there's Stanford, all of them.
Stanford, great example. Yeah. What is the average tuition for Stanford?
Nothing I can afford.
Right. So that's just tuition, right? And you're in state. So now, and I know about this intimately because, like I said, I got a 21-year-old that's going to Lamar University, right? So you got tuition, then you got to factor in room and board, then you got to factor in a meal plan, right? Oh, and then when you go to pay, they don't tell you about all these additional technology fees, athletic fees, weight room fees, computer fees, HVAC fees. They don't tell you about all these additional fees that they tack onto it. So when we look at it, we're like, oh, tuition is $20,000, right? And you split that over two semesters. So you're thinking $10,000. No, you're still paying $20,000 per semester because of the additional fees. So you think about that, $40,000 a year for 4 years, you're looking at $160,000, right? And if you're paying it out of pocket, hats off to you because you're doing something right? You already have $160,000, so I don't know why you're going there. But if you're not and you're using loans, like that is crippling to a young person who's getting ready to get out into the world. $160,000 of debt I'm sorry, I did my math wrong.
You said
160. 160. He's talking about is $40,000 a year, pretty much when all the fees and everything included. So when you start your life, you get your degree, and you're like, all right, I'm ready to start my life. You can't because you got $160,000 in debt, and that's not including the interest that they start charging virtually immediately, right? So that why? Especially if you're talking about getting into the tech space, coding, developing cybersecurity. Like why?
No,
You
I
can
agree with you. I agree with you. But I think at the time, the amount of resources that we have available to us now, like, wasn't available back then.
agree.
So yeah, because now, like, I learn pretty much a language a week as far as programming, because there's so much resources and there's so much content. And as far as, like, there's so much quality business people that you could follow online who give you great advice. And back then, that infrastructure just wasn't there. So I
Agree.
think today, yeah, it doesn't make sense unless you're going to be a rocket scientist or like a doctor or something. Then it doesn't really make sense for you to go to college. But back then, I wouldn't blame someone
But
for
but but
anything like that.
free game for anybody that's watching this, that's young, that is at a crossroad in their life, right? This is free game. If you're looking to get into the tech space, you can literally get a baseline certification for Security Plus, for example. You can get 5 days worth of training, take the test, and get the retest voucher for about $3,300. That $3,300 course can get you in an entry level position at an organization, depending on where you are, right, in the United States, anywhere from 40 to 70,000, right? So these universities that are offering programs for cybersecurity or some other thing or subject, like, there's another way. Like, find that other way, because there's no need to start your life with tons and tons of debt when you don't need to. One thing I have a youth mentoring program here in South Dallas. It's called Real Youth Mentoring. It's ran by a buddy of mine, Tim Jackson. I tell young people, do not go to school for anything that you can learn on YouTube,
I agree. I second that.
right? Like, don't, I mean, and if you're going to school for the college experience, stop it. If you're going to school for humanities or general studies, slap yourself, right? Like, we are in a point now where it's critical that you are in tune and in line with technology, because the no one's going to hire you because you have a degree. I will take practical experience any day. Somebody who did 4 years in the military, somebody who has taken their time to get the certification and who can speak the language and do those tasks. Like, I would take them over somebody who went to school for 4 years, because I know over here you got practical experience. Over here, it's book theory. It's theory, right? Like, it's nothing that's been tried and true, or proven yet. This is all theory. So if I send you to a job site to do some work or do an assessment, like, you don't know the basics of how to do that assessment. So go the path, get the certs if you're in the tech space. Once you get with a company, most companies offer tuition reimbursement. Then get your education that way. Don't go and get a bill that you can never shake.
No, I agree. I totally agree. And if I had, like, I just bought my house, like this house right here. I just bought it
Nice.
last year. If I had
Congratulations.
debt. Oh, thank you. But if I had, like, college debt and was, like, in debt like hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's no way I would have been
Absolutely.
able to get this. You know,
Absolutely.
and the way I learned was just like, I had a theory in my 20s. I'm 35 now, and I
Mhm.
had a theory that I'm not gonna learn anything that no one's not paying me for. So before I would learn any new skill, before I would learn how to build websites, I go out and get customers. And then once I got a customer, I'd be like, all right, be back in 2 weeks. and because I was motivated, because, like, there was a paycheck waiting for me, I would learn how to build a website in like 3 days, because I was like, all right, I'm going to need 3 days to learn how to build a website. And then the other days to like complete the website
Mm-hmm.
for the customer. And then by 2 weeks, like I have a whole new skill and I just got paid to learn it pretty much.
100%.
So, yeah.
Hey, absolutely.
Yeah. I think, I just think like maybe generationally, actually, no, I don't want to say that.
No, you're right.
My particular experience, just led me down the path where like because I was in college and I was like, I'm taking all these random classes. I'm like, I don't care about none of this. Like, I don't care about none of this at all. So like, so I dropped out to pretty much start a business, and starting the business is where I learned like every single thing that I cared about, and I learned how to barter. Like I wanted to take kickboxing and I didn't like have the money for it. So I went to the kickboxing studio and I was like, yo, I'll make you a website if you give me classes. And that happened. And I think I ended up getting a better like hand of the stick because like his website took 2 weeks and I took like 3 years worth of classes.
But no, that's what I'm driving at, right? Is like you're getting real world experience, right? And what people fail to realize, they think that, and even I did. I thought I had to have all this money to do certain things, but you know what? Once you start opening your mouth and you say, "Hey, I have this I can offer you. Can you, give me this in return?" Right? And if it's something where they'll benefit from, more than likely they're going to be like, okay. Like my business mentor, uh, I was looking at buying a business, right? And I went down and I sat down and I talked with him, and I had to kind of laid out, like what the business was, how we going to procure it, the funds that was going to be needed. I just wanted him to look at it and give me feedback, right? And with no expectation of asking him for the money. And I asked for 30 minutes. He gave me 2.5 hours, right? And at the end of that meeting, he says, "Hey, don't worry about the money. You'll get the money. Just answer this one question for me." And it was a simple question, right? Because you're looking at a young dude who has never owned a business before but has an entrepreneurial spirit. His thing was, how do we keep the guy who is currently running the business on the payroll? Figure that out, and you got the money, right? But again, it's like you don't know unless you open your mouth. You ask, right? You tell people what you need, and you will be surprised at the doors that open up. And I tell young people that all the time when we're sitting there talking. Hey, what questions you do not? If you walk away from me and you had a question that you had an opportunity to ask that you didn't ask, I am upset with you. Because you have my undivided attention. You have me standing here in front of you, and you don't ask the question because you're afraid. Like you're never gonna get anywhere in life. You're never gonna succeed being afraid. I have right behind me, be afraid of mediocrity. That's something that I have these behind me, not just to show off for you guys, but it's because this is what I live by, right? I'm afraid of mediocrity, right? I come out of Rochester, New York, where it wasn't the best living standards, right? I remember what my why is. I remember what my purpose. I remember why I started this business, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And young folks, if you're out there and you're watching this, and just keep those two things in mind. Know what your why is, why you're doing something, and be afraid of mediocrity. Mediocrity, complacency, they're all synonyms in my opinion. Those things are dream killers, right? So strive to be greater than mediocre.
And that's a feedback for people who are trying to get into the tech industry as well. You like closed mouths don't get fed. Like 100%. If you work for one of the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, whatever the other A is, Apple, Netflix, or Google, like you need to be very vocal about what you need. Otherwise, they're just going to think that you're lazy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. The ones who,
Like if you're to let your voice be known, or let your voice, tell what you need, or what you're missing, then they frown on that type of behavior. You have to be very vocal about what you need, and you have to let your needs be known. Otherwise, like, you're not efficient, and
oh,
they worship at the altar of efficiency. So
100%. Because
yeah.
when our youth mentoring programs, we had an individual who owns a trucking company, um, and he's doing very, very well, right? I mean, really well, like really well. And and he says his thing was, practice makes better, process makes perfect, right? So that goes back to what you were saying as far as efficiency, right? You have to have a process in order to be efficient, right? And in order for that process to be efficient, you have to practice it. So take that same mentality and that mindset to say, okay, I have to practice opening my mouth and telling people what I want or what I need, right? And then once you do that enough times, you have a process of doing it, and it becomes efficient. And it's not, it doesn't come off as, you're whining and complaining. It comes off as, oh, okay, this person they have ambition, right? And when you show that, people will be willing to give you all the help and support that you need. Okay.
Yeah.
So just always keep that in mind. I'm preaching to the choir, but
And building on what you just said, like, I work at like top tier tech companies, right? So if you want to get into that kind of situation for yourself, like, you have to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. Like, I used to be averse to call myself or being labeled a nerd, because like I was interested in smart stuff and it wasn't cool to be smart. But bro, just embrace it. Like, wear suspenders, put tape on your glasses, like, and because you want to be the best. And in order to be the best, you have to like really just like submerge yourself in
100%.
want to be the best at. And like, my wife, she gets annoyed at me because I go to sleep just watching videos on data structures and algorithms, like trying to like really memorize it. Because you have to, like, if you want to work at an elite level, then you have to be elite. Like, when I go to work, I'm competing with the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't say their names, but whenever the company cut 11,000 people off a month ago, like, I wasn't one of them, because I got to be the best. And a lot of people, especially from my generation, they're like, the black people especially, like, you have to be twice as good, right, to
100%.
compete in an industry with other races. And not as a race thing, if you're of a different race, don't get offended, but you just really have to be twice as good in
But
order
not
to, like,
let's yes no let's talk about let's park there for a moment, right? Let's keep it up. Let's keep it 100. What you said, and this was crazy, right? We off camera we talked about our backgrounds, right? Uh, you grew up where you grew up. I grew up where I grew up, and we heard the same thing, right? We have to be 2, 3, 4, 5 times better than everyone else, right? But where we direct that energy and what we direct that energy towards determines everything. So what I say is, we did an expo, not an expo, excuse me. We did a symposium, our youth mentoring program, and we do one a month, and we take a sector or industry that we know the kids focus on, and we show them how to make $1 million within that industry without being the product, right? So the first one we did was sports, because all of our black boys want to be football players or basketball players, right? Like, the shelf life in those careers are shorter than short, but they'll spend from the age of 4 years old to their adult life trying to be the best at a sport, where there's only 1/2 of 1% who ever make it to the professional level. And then there's even another 1/2 of 1% of those who actually make it to, past the 3.5 year mark. And then 1/2 of 1% of those become elite, right? So you are literally, trying to find a needle in the haystack, right? You're trying to find a morsel or a speck in a universe, right? And you're spending years and years of trying to do that. You have a better chance of being me or Dwayne, Albert, whoever else, if you even take half of that time and apply yourself to that. Like, money is moving, right? Like, there's so much money floating around here. And if you're only focusing on one area, like, you're missing all the other areas where that money is floating around. And these are talents that you currently have and that you were born with, and that's innate to you, that you take for granted, right? When you and I were coming up, there was no such thing as a social media content influencer or an influencer, period, right? Like that didn't exist. YouTube didn't exist, right? So there's so many ways for people to be successful. Like you said, you have to want it. You have to be excellent at it. You have to immerse yourself in it to be the cream of the crop, so people will seek you out. You understand? So young black boys where I'm from, I tell them all the time, you can come to football practice every single day with no problem, but you can't come here 2 days a month to get life lessons and things that's actually going to propel you for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's your priorities?
And another thing I would like young kids to understand is core competencies. Like, if you are good at football or good at basketball, then those talents will transfer to other industries, because, like, it's not just your dribble that makes you good at basketball. It's not just your jump shot. It's your ability to focus and train in order to improve your jump shot or your dribble. So if you can transfer that into, like, let's say you want a job in tech, like, in order to become better at, like, programming, you need to train. You need to sit down, you need to focus, and you need to, like, work on your jump shot, so to speak, or whatever. You need to identify whatever areas you're weak in, and you need to just constantly improve, just like working out. And it's the same exact thing. And if you can transfer your core competency that makes you good at a sport into, like, an industry, then you will be unstoppable. Absolutely. And that's the advice I wish I had when I was, like, a teenager.
See, but this goes back to my I won't call it a gripe with education or how we currently go about educating children, but just think about it from this perspective. I used to love basketball, right? I still do. I still play. I'm just old. But at the time when, I'm at my peak or my pinnacle, where, I put in my 10,000 hours, right? And I'm really, really good at basketball. It's all muscle memory mechanics, right? But let's say my geometry teacher takes us into the basketball gym and teaches us geometry using basketball, or what angle you need to shoot from each spot on the floor to do a perfect bank shot, right? What's the trajectory? How much now you get into physics? How much force is needed to shoot a 3-pointer, right? How much force is needed to shoot a floater over somebody that's 7 feet and it drop directly into the basket, right? When you're doing that, when you're looking at athletes who do this, they have a level of genius that they mastered in that space. We all have that level of genius within us. So we just, again, it's prioritization and where we focus that. I was able to do a lot of really cool stuff on the basketball court because I put in my 10,000 hours and I was focused on it, right? But here I am years later. Now I'm doing this. I'm putting that same energy and focus into growing this business, and it's growing. It's we in just last year we tripled, right, what we did or the previous year. So it's taking how we teach our young people, right, boys, girls, whoever, taking how we teach our young people and put it in a term where in a manner where they can actually understand it in life. Like, you know, any sport, like you said, those skills transfer, teamwork, right? Consistency, discipline, right? Integrity, right? Those things transfer into the professional environment. People are going to do business with you if you're a team player, right? If you're consistent, you're trustworthy, you have discipline, you're going to be successful in whatever it is that you do. So, I just think if we trained our young people in things that they like and relate it to everyday life, excuse me, we see the trajectory of our young kids go through the roof because now it's not just only focusing on basketball. They're like, oh, well, that also applies over here. Now you get some of your phenomenal basketball players becoming physicists because now they understand how physics works. They understand how geometry works, right? They understand algebra. They understand the different variables and how to make that decision on the drop of a dime.
Actually, I think if like geometry and physics and algebra was taught using basketball metaphors, like a lot more people will grasp.
The whole hood would be physicists and mathematicians. I'm telling you, because
Yeah,
like, but again, it's how we teach. It's how there's an individual that I read his material in his books all the time. He used to go by the name of Booker T. Coleman. Now he goes by Kaba Kawane. He has a acronym called My Skill, right? Talking about how we teach children through music, um, music, interconnection, uh, spatial, kinesthetic, um, interpersonal language linguistics, right? That's the acronym My Skill. We in modern day schools we focus on language and linguistics and how we teach, right? And if you come from where I come from, you don't use uh, you know, SAT words as I like to call them, right? You don't use big words in your home, but you still communicate the same message. So why not communicate that message in a different manner where they can get it and they can retain it, right? Music. You look at music. The what's the most catchy part of a song? It's the chorus. They call it the hook, right? Because it's simple, it's catchy, it's over entertaining or beat that you like, and it hooks you in. You'll remember a hook before you remember the lyrics of any other lyric. You know what I'm saying? So if we can program people through music in that aspect, why can't we educate them through music, right? Why can't we utilize these other skills that we have for young folks and adults to be great?
absolutely. Well, Ellen, I really enjoyed this conversation. Could you leave us with the final word? Is there anything that you want to promote coming up?
So final word, let's see. So, yes, uh, if you're in the Dallas Fort Worth area, if you're not, with this perfectly fine. Um, you know, realyouthmentoring.org, RealYouthMentoring.org. That's our youth mentoring program here in Dallas. We do a lot of great things. Myself, Tim Jackson, Lewis White, Orlandis Broner. We do some really good things for the youth in the community. Um, so don't give up on the young folks, man. Let's meet them where they are. Let's get them to where they want to be. Right. Take the time to understand and you know meet them at that level where they are to bring them to where they want to go and where we want them to be. Um, So that I would say that is my parting words, and cybersecurity hygiene, and you know, that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Alan, for coming on the Medallion XLN podcast.
Absolutely.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.